Hey guys, and welcome back to another week of astrology. Today we're going to be looking at the astrology of July 26th to August 2nd of 2021. My name's David. I'm your astrologer from Haunted Cerebral Astrology. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all your support, liking, commenting, subscribing. It all means a lot to me and it goes a super long way. I just want to make a couple announcements before we get into the astrology. My new website is finally online. I'm super excited about this. I put a lot of work into getting it together. It's at hauntedcerebral.com. So all the info is in the description box, but it makes it super easy to schedule appointments with me now. I have a whole scheduler system. I'm probably going to do a video that will kind of be a tutorial or just like a walkthrough of the website this week as well. So stay tuned for that. But it should make things a lot more easy for people rather than having to go through this whole email conversation thing. You can just streamline it right in, book your appointment, and you can choose what service you want to do. I've updated some of my prices. So if you're looking to do different kinds of readings, you can get different kinds of readings. So just check those out and contact me if you have any questions. Information, of course, in the description box. Other announcement is I realized that I missed last week's electional video. It's okay. I'm still going to be doing those. So if you're expecting it, no worries. I'm getting back into it again. I was just a little bit overwhelmed last week. Okay, so let's just get right into the astrology. We can see it here. 1 second. Let me rearrange my whole... I always find that this annotator always seems to be lost. Anyway, so, okay, here's the astrology. What is going on here? All right, here we go, finally. So I'm going to do things kind of similar like last week. I will just brush over July 26th, which is today, Monday, because what I'm trying to do is move more into starting from Tuesdays into the next Monday, the following week, because I do the astrology on the Monday and usually I'm doing it at a time in the day when maybe some of the astrology's already happened. So I want to try and do things a little bit ahead of the curve. Anyway, so this week in general is a little bit more intense than last week. Not that last weeks have not been busy. There's been just more lunar transit. So it may be more like on the go, everyday hustle bustle kind of stuff, feeling more like business as usual. This week, there's going to be more like big transits happening and some major ingresses and some aspects that are going on. So I'm going to try and break those down. But for the most part, the thing that's cool about this week is that it will bring a lot more things into the light, into clarity. We'll have a better sense of direction with where things are going next, now that the sun is in Leo, and it's going to be making those major aspects to Saturn in Uranus in the next days. So another thing is that Mercury is following closely behind Leo, and it's moving into Leo on the 28th. And then Jupiter also goes back into Aquarius also on the same day. So actually the 28th is kind of a crazy day. And then we got that there's an interesting Venus squaring the nodes as well. And then what else is happening? We got Mars moving into Virgo just after it makes the opposition to Jupiter. So, you know, becoming a bit more measured and calculated in our actions, decisions, etc. And then we have later on in the week, the Mercury Cazimi in Leo, which is going to be interesting because directly after it, we got Mercury opposite Saturn and then Sun opposite Saturn within like that 24-hour period. And then, you know, what else is going on? Yeah, those are kind of the major things. And just so everyone knows, I am, of course, reading the astrology from Berlin, Germany, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter where you are, just adjust the times. The transits are going to represent the same things wherever you are in the world. Think of it like a world clock. The clock is just telling the time. You adjust it to where you are to tell the time. So the astrology is like the time, and you just adjust it to where you are, like on a world clock. It's very, very, very similar. Okay, so let's get into it. So just to brush up on July, so let's just start from where we are now. So we're at around 1 o'clock on July 26th, which is the Monday. And it's mostly a lunar day. I kind of brushed up on this last week, so I'll just kind of briefly go through it. Moon's going to make that opposition to Mars just before it moves into Pisces. So tables are turning a little bit. It could just be like there's a little bit more stress in the morning or in this part of the day or wherever you are. There's just a little bit more of that stress about what to do next, and do you have enough time, and is there enough energy, or is there enough to do things that you want to do versus what you have to do because of this. The moon would have been in Aquarius when it made that opposition. And this could also just be a reality check of some kind. Maybe you're facing off with a foe of some kind. Maybe you get your toe stubbed on something. We're tracing our dreams now. It's going to be a challenge, but there's also dangers in that too. And then the moon moves into Pisces and it makes that conjunction with Jupiter. So something that I think this is kind of like the completing of what was the Jupiter Venus opposition. So now the moon's like meeting with Jupiter on some level. And I think it translates that conversation being in the exaltation of Venus as well. So maybe whatever that thing you did during the opposition with Venus and Jupiter last week, on Thursday, you would have now completed that on some level. Maybe there's something that you spent a lot of money on that you had to buy, or something that that you were working out within relationships or in some sort of plan or some sort of detail that you wanted to figure out, or something where it's related to your vision and where things are going next. Now you're kind of like completing what that was about. You're just picking that up, or you're making the exchange, or you're translating that conversation into reality. And then, of course, the moon's going to oppose Venus later, not long after, I think around 2. Oh, I got to fix my chart here. So move it over to 0 Aries. This is usually how I read the chart, just because it can be kind of confusing otherwise. Also, I changed some of the colors of the planets. I'm using the colors from a medieval text called the Picatrix, which describes the colors of the planets. So they're not elemental based, but they're based on this older text. And there's no descriptions of the colors for the outer planets. So I made them more standard color. Okay, anyway. So moon makes that opposition to Venus around 3 o'clock here. So, just seeing where things you brought can be nurtured a little bit more. Just kind of best not to stress out too much about where things are at this point. Maybe you need to rebalance a bit and to get back to a relaxed place. It's not really like a safe space yet, so to speak. There's still like a lot to do before you'll feel like you can decompress a bit. Maybe some things that you thought were like in the bag are like, you still have to do something to figure them out. So there's still some loose ends tied up. And I feel like this opposition is reminding us that there's like it's difficult to get comfort while Venus is in Virgo in its fall. So it's in a bit of an uncomfortable position. Maybe we just can't seem to enjoy where we're at just yet. And I think the moon making that opposition to Venus is reminding us and showing us that there's still some things to do before we can kind of settle down a bit. And then later on, the moon will make that square to the nodes. So it's just moving, even though the moon has moved out of its waxing phase, there was the full moon, so there was that culmination, there was release on some level. And while the moon is decreasing in light, there is like a decrease in energy and consolidating things, especially after that conjunction with Saturn, realizing that we can't just do everything all the time. We have to let go of things that are not fitting, that are not going to fit in perfectly, or if we fell back on some former behaviors that we don't necessarily agree with, we just have to kind of learn to let go that we're not perfect, that things are going to be okay. But, maybe if we want things to change, we can start to do things a bit differently. But as the moon makes that square to the nodes, it's kind of seeing where we did kind of let go of things a bit. We didn't really like hold up to our principles on some level, or some of us did. And now we're seeing that things are kind of increasing. We have to get back into the game. But at the same time, there's this like decrease at the same time. So, there's more of an even pace, giving what we can get one thing at a time. But there's no breaks. So that's kind of Monday in a bag. So I just wanted to go over Monday one more time, but I feel like in the next transit videos I do, going to try and skip Monday because I would have gone over it in the previous weeks. I'm just making that transition now for anyone who's wondering. All right, so let's move into Tuesday. So not too much going on today. The moon is still in Pisces, so there's a bit of like spaced outness on some level. And as it's moving towards Neptune, especially, some things are working out. Some things feel like they're going. There's some optimism still, but with Jupiter kind of moving back into Aquarius soon, we're seeing that like maybe our resources are not enough. Maybe we've invested a lot into like the last months, or maybe we haven't done enough to make use of all that Jupiter and Pisces freedom and openness. But in general, today is just the moon moving through Pisces and kind of like being a bit more loose about things and wanting not really to take responsibility for much, even though we kind of have to on some level. Wait a second. I want to show the aspect lines. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, basically what happens, we get that Moon is going to make that overcoming sextile to Uranus. Could be some way we have to adjust to some surprises or unexpected events or unexpected stability to this Taurus story. So it's something we thought that was more solid, but rather than it being kind of forceful and hard to deal with from the opposition square with the sextile, it's like, okay, we can make the adjustments on the go. We can do what needs to be done in order to maintain that level of like tranquility that we're kind of feeling while the moon's through Pisces. So the unexpected is, of course, navigable. I think with this sextile, we can just go with it as it happens. So no need to stress out too much. Just depends on where your mood's at. Sometimes, I think sometimes it's like when we're really checked out and we get that kind of dose of reality or something outside of that kind of freedom space that we're feeling so good in. And if something comes in and kind of like interrupts that, we can be aggravated by it. But just see how you're at. And if you do realize that you got aggravated for it, say sorry if you have to, because like I said, Venus is still in Virgo there, being the exaltation of Pisces. So the context is not so comfortable yet. Anyway, so then the moon moves into that conjunction with Neptune. This is really the only other thing going on this day. And so there is a chance on some level to maybe enjoy some of the dreamy, steamy vibes of this Pisces, like the last of Jupiter and Pisces too. Jupiter is going to move into Aquarius tomorrow, basically on Wednesday. And that said, it's important to also kind of know where you're at in all this. If you are just being kind of dreamy and wishy-washy about things, but not really like being checked in with reality and thinking everything's going to work out. This is kind of the story I've been saying for the last weeks in general on these transit videos is like, we can, of course, just trust that everything's going to work out fine if we don't, but at some level, if we haven't been making the efforts and taking the actions to prepare for when Jupiter leaves Pisces and there's no more of that like growth and expansion and kind of openness for things to just work out, we may be getting kind of a surprise. So I feel like the moon conjoining with Neptune is kind of reminding us on some level, even if you want to enjoy it, of course you can, but if you lose yourself, then you may be kind of disappointed when things start to run out. I kind of made this analogy like in meditation, Zen meditation, Zazen. We want to be able to come back to the present moment. So we can get lost in thoughts. We can allow for the mind to just be completely free and like stream through the thoughts that the mind is going to naturally do anyway. But it's when we realize that, and we come back to the present moment, ask ourselves, why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I? Who is the one that is sitting here? Then we're practicing mindfulness. We're coming back to the present moment. We're training our body and our mind to be more in the present moment and to be more open to where things are now, rather than being fearful and stressed out about where they are going or where they're coming from. Okay, so that's it for Tuesday. Let's move into Wednesday. First thing first is that Mercury moves into Leo, joins the sun there. So Mercury moves into Leo. Things are just getting louder, more prideful, passionate. Voices are going to be more driven to be authentic on some level, wanting to speak boldly in general. This is like getting in touch with your personal voice a little bit more, authentic tactics, really to do your own thing, using your skills to be more in touch with where your story is going, where you are feeling most authentic and individual on some level. Just be aware that when using your authentic voice, it doesn't necessarily mean that other people have to like it. So if you're really voicing your opinion about something, don't be surprised if there is some backlash on that. No, not necessarily means that you're wrong. Not necessarily means that what you're saying is not the right thing to say. It just doesn't mean that everyone's going to enjoy it. Doesn't mean that your opinion is the only opinion in this world. So, saying what you got to say, but accepting that it isn't going to necessarily agree with everyone. And, Mercury does technically move into combustion. I mean, it was in combustion already while in Cancer, but because of that sign, the sign boundary, there was some kind of buffer between it. But now that Mercury is moving into combustion exactly with Leo, with the sun in Leo, I think that it could be like that drive, that need to show, that want to make an illumination on your authenticity, on your vision, on your direction and your ambitions and things could be what kind of blinds others from what your true voice is trying to say. So just be aware of that. I think if you really want to say something during Mercury and Leo, a good time would be in the next days, maybe not necessarily right away once Mercury moves into Leo, but especially during the Cazimi. And also I'll talk about it in a bit, but Moon's going to move into Aries this day and make that trine to Mercury too. So that could be a good time, I think, on Wednesday to communicate something. So next thing, though, is that Moon makes that sextile to Pluto, and just before moving into Aries too. So it's the last aspect that the Moon makes. Perhaps some of the fear and darkness we touched on during the full moon, we see again on some level, but this time from a more harmonious and manageable perspective. We can see what is happening and do something about it rather than pick it apart and worry about it, be fearful about it, not really have any clear sense of what to do about that. So this is a good time to do something about what we're afraid of. Moon moves into Aries then basically immediately after, and well, not immediately, but shortly after it moves out of Pisces, as it separates from that sextile to Pluto and then makes the trine to Mercury, which just moved into Leo. So maybe this is now a good choice to voice something that's more bold, that's exciting on some level, make a message of some kind, maybe start to work on the message, try to get your words together, to do something that's really about exchanges with others, to take some action on some exchange. Say something maybe you believe in, say something you want to direct outwardly. This is also kind of, there's like some funny quality to this too. It's like people saying whatever the hell they want in all different ways. And maybe it's also good to check in and just be like, okay, just because we can say what we want doesn't mean it's not going to come with issues, just like I said before. And this is possible day of messages being sent out in general. Like maybe your inbox just gets like full in general, or you're the one sending out the inbox, sending out the messages. But those messages come with fire, maybe some hostility on some level, excitement as well. And maybe there could be some competition or headbutting and exchanges. So confidence is really high right now. So we all think we know what the story is. We all think what we know is best. But, we have to ask ourselves before we kind of just dive into that, do we really know what's going on? And then, this is kind of a big day because then we get Jupiter moving back into Aquarius. So Jupiter in Pisces is officially over. We're now going to see that growth, expansion, openness regress pretty suddenly. Don't be surprised if restrictions reemerge on some level. I was just out doing some errands before I came back here to do this video, and already on the news, I'm seeing like the numbers in Berlin are going up suddenly. You're already seeing it in the news too. All this kind of like the numbers are going back up with COVID, and it could be that people are going to start to rethink like, okay, was it really a bit premeditated to open things up, or that there will be some, I think also with the moon being in Aries now and making that trine to Mars, it's like, even if there is some decision, it's like, okay, well, maybe we have to make restrictions. It's like people are going to say their opinion about that, be it for it or against it. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of that going down in the news. So I think like, don't be surprised, if restrictions do reemerge either now or in the near future. Depends on the context, of course, wherever you are in the world. How have we been taking responsibility for these restrictions, on a personal level, but also wherever you are in the world, whatever society, whatever way your place in the world is contributing or participating in the society. So check in with, I think in the last months with Jupiter in Pisces since May, and see all the growth and nice things that maybe have happened there, and realize that it really was a special spring. There have been a lot of really like intense things that happened since then, especially for certain parts of the world. But in general, there's been a lot more optimism about dealing with these especially with the pandemic. I think too is like there's been a lot of like optimism about us being able to handle it now that there's been more vaccinations and things like that. But with Jupiter moving back into Aquarius, it's like, okay, well, maybe there needs to be more, right? If we want that openness to really be solid later, then we have to do more. So these things are going to come back. Jupiter is going to come back into Pisces in December, and it will be there more predominantly next year. So, just because things may be kind of regressing a bit now doesn't mean that they're regressing forever. But basically, Saturn's going to be running the show now. So now Jupiter qualities are going to be repressed on some level. So dealing with impermanence and a sense of decay and loss, these Saturnian topics, these things don't last forever. Being in Aquarius too, it's like, what kind of things are really going to work for the future, and we have to like separate ourselves from the things that don't work. And that's where you get this outsider insider paradigm. It's like not everybody's going to fit into the vision of the future that Saturn and Aquarius is constructing, right? So there could be more consolidating more closely with what we have, contemplating how to work with the things we have, not being so free and nonchalant with our beliefs, opinions, money, faith, and things like that. These Jupiter qualities. So they're not going to be having that more, what's this Italian word? I can't remember, but a bit more flaneur, just a bit more like easygoing with things. And now that Jupiter is back in a Saturn sign, these things are going to be more constricted. So putting things in order and not assuming that it's all going to work out for the best is a good way, I think, to go about this, to let go of expectation in general. Just do the work that you need to do and let go of the results. So taking the time to get a good structure and plan in order, getting that support that you need so that you can prepare for when things are going to get more difficult again, and using our time smartly, sustainably, and thinking about the future in general with Aquarius. Jupiter is also about unifying and bringing things together. So now that Jupiter is back in Aquarius, it's trying to bring things together that are less in quantity. Where are those loose pieces and signs of things that are not being put together now? This is about bringing it all together, getting a more humble perspective on things, realizing that that there isn't just an endless supply of everything at this moment. And going back to the beginning, maybe a little bit of what 2021 was about, and figuring out how to work with what you have in order to move forward. So yeah, more to be said about Jupiter in Aquarius. Actually, if you are signed up for the newsletter I do with Perry Dust's newsletter, the info should be in the description box. I do a pretty in-depth report on Jupiter moving back into Aquarius. So check that out. And then moving forward, I just wanted to make note on that we have Venus here making a square to the nodes. And I thought that was kind of interesting that now Venus is in this halfway point between the nodes. Venus is, of course, moving towards the south node. So there is something that's kind of becoming a bit more otherworldly and decreasing in general as it comes to Venetian topics. Now that Venus is also in Virgo, there could be things where we're not so comfortable in. We're out of our comfort zone with some of those things that in order to kind of get back to a place where we can feel more comfortable in them, we have to learn how to be more specific and detailed with them rather than just constantly being thinking that these things are like outside of a detail. We have to get back into that detail on some level. So there's a bit of a downer on that. Downer for pleasures. We're looking forward, looking to get with Venus and Virgo. Venus then conjoins this. I want to make note too that Venus conjoins the south node in October, which is when Mercury and Mars Cazimi at the same time in Libra. So Venus rules over Libra. So there's something about the Venus story coming up in the next months, especially with the Venus ingress into Libra in August. I think Venus is going to be taking a more dominant role in the next weeks too, even though Venus is in the evening star phase. I think once Venus moves into Libra, moves into that overcoming position with with Saturn and Jupiter, I think there's going to just be more, and moving out of the any kind of aspects to Uranus, but then making the square to Pluto. I think there's going to be something about the Venus part of the story that is trying to figure things out, that's trying to make new negotiations, make new deals. So I think that the square to Venus right now is saying something about that. What is happening now is maybe going to be played out a little bit more in October. Something about the fallen Venus making the same mistakes in Venus things right now could be exemplified later on. So things that have to do with relationships, aesthetics, diplomacies, compromise, desires and lust, comforts and enjoyments, senses of values and profits on some level too. And the materials that we have, the things that are more tactile, that we enjoy to touch and embrace with, that we get more justice and beauty out of. So are we in touch with all these things now? Because it will come up later. Things need to change. If we can make some changes now to get more into a more comfortable and sustainable position, that's really going to help us later. Because if we can't, I think that there may be some troubles later going on. So then Wednesday's kind of like the big day in some ways, because then there's still that like last thing that happens is that the moon then moves into a trine with the sun, still in the kind of, it's separated totally from the Mercury trine, but the moon carries that over. The moon is always carrying over the last aspects that it made. So we get that trine to the sun, from moon to the sun, just before the day ends here, or wherever you are. it's going to kind of lay that over into the next part. And so things for the most part may be going according to plan on some level. We know that the story is continuing. We may feel at ease on some level with how the story is unfolding, but there are other forces at play. And I think with Moon being in that Mars sign, it's like, sure, we know the story's going forward, and some of the things we're doing is making us feel like we're getting in more touch with our authentic self as we move into the story, the next part of the story. But I think with the Mars opposition now to Jupiter, that's going to perfect. I mean, they're in the same degree, so they're in an opposition already. But it's going to perfect tomorrow. And I think that with that opposition, it's like, sure, the story's going forward and there's some support there from the actions we're taking for that story, but it's not necessarily easy ride. So there's a passing sense, I think, of things being in the right place at the right time, and a small dose of this feeling of like all things happen for a reason, so to speak. But I think it's really just a passing thing for Wednesday evening here, or Wednesday, wherever you are on Wednesday. All right, so let's move on into Thursday. So of course, the first thing that happens is the moon perfects a sextile to Saturn. And so we can make some adjustments on the go if we have to. Maybe some here in Germany or wherever you are, you can make some adjustments if it's just for your routine and get more in touch with the responsibility of taking care of yourself on whatever level. There's new movement in Aquarius too, from Jupiter moving back in there. So it's a good time for us to get in touch with the gravity shifts that's going on in our lives or in the world in general. Saturn is also telling us that there's things that need to be paid attention to now before they fall apart, and in this harmonious kind of like gentle way. If you can look at it, if you think of Saturn in a gentle way, who knows? But anyway, so the moon is making that sextile to Saturn and is making it necessary on some level to make some adjustments to those necessities, so we can kind of work with that in a more manageable, meaningful way. All right, so basically the other big thing to talk about this day, of course, is that big red line across the chart, which is the opposition of Jupiter or Mars to Jupiter. And Mars makes that opposition just before moving into Virgo. So it adds to the intensity of this week. I think Mars is like, you can think of like Mars, because Mars represents weapons, right? And Mars is like in Leo is like this heat-seeking missile on some level. And Jupiter is like this gas tank now, this big bulking air sign gas tank in Aquarius. And, you know, this could be something explosive that happens, sudden, eventful, potentially destructive even. Oppositions are hard aspects. You know, they have a lot to do with things either tearing apart or complementing one another. And it's of the nature of Saturn. So there's something that could be setting things apart and creating opposition between two forces, right? So I think it's important to note some of the last hard aspects that Mars made to Jupiter. So the first one is like from July, August 2020, there was that overcoming square that Mars made to Jupiter. And we got it coincided with the Beirut explosion. So that was really kind of intense thing that happened. And then the second thing that happened January, February, beginning of this year, when Mars made the inferior square to Jupiter, there was this coup d'etat in Myanmar. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something kind of similar on some level of an eruption or a destructive or forceful event that takes place. Something that could be constructive maybe on some level, but very troublesome too. So if there is some like head butting, Jupiter is going to be wanting to make things work together and to bring things together and want to try and stop the fighting on some level. But it's also like going to explode things and make things bigger. And Mars is going to want to cut and sever things and not bring things together except for in a competitive manner, in a mission-based manner. So it's going to be interesting to see what that is about. Mars may just like punch through the parachute of Jupiter. This is like also realizing that maybe you're not paying enough attention right now, and maybe you need to be paying attention. It's like, you know, when you're walking on the street and you're crossing the street and you're looking at your phone, and then like halfway through the street, you realize it's actually a red light and there's a car that might even hit you, right? So it's time to pay attention, because accidents can happen. Mars is in Leo just before moving into Virgo. So there is still this pride. There is still this like drive to be the most, to be this very individual and strong-willed, authoritative, kind of putting the ego at stake on some level. And Jupiter is back in Aquarius. So there's a sense that things need to be fixed right now. And so Jupiter is just like, okay, I really got to fix this thing. And Mars is just like, no, I really got to do this thing. And those things are not really meeting each other so gently, so to speak. So yeah, and then Mars moves into Virgo not long after and breaks the opposition. I mean, it's carrying it over by degree, but once it's in the new sign, really the aspect ends. So this is one kind of mitigating factor, I think, to the opposition, because it doesn't really last that long. Like it perfects here in Germany at 6, but then by the end of the day, it leaves Leo, goes into Virgo. So I see this as a bit of a mitigating factor. Could be that whatever does take place is very sudden, hostile, volatile event of some kind, but then it's just over. Then there's like this drive to figure something out, to fix something, to sort things out. Maybe it's also, I mean, the planet that now rules Mars is Mercury. Mercury is in Leo, so there's something left over from what kind of action or drive or effort is put into some sort of hostility or that headbutting between Jupiter. But in general, now that Mars is in a Mercury sign, it wants to articulate something. So maybe it's about us becoming overly critical on something, or with that cocky ego drive action that may have just taken place, realizing that we need to be more tactical rather than just doing something, you know, to get some good results. There's got to be some sort of plan and order. It can't just be wailing swings and hits, especially as Mercury is moving into that opposition to Saturn and the Cazimi in the next days. And we got to get more specific. We got to put our drives into more single efforts. Could get a little bit overly specific and neurotic a little bit, but something's got to be done differently now that Mars has moved into a new sign. The energy has shifted. Things have to be done in a different manner. So also, I think it's good to point out that now that Mars is in a Mercury sign, words could become more contestable and hostile in general moving forward. So just be conscious of that. Okay, so let's move on into Friday. First things first is that before the moon leaves Aries, it's going to make that square to Pluto. And I think in general, this is also just more of a lunar day. It's just lunar aspects really taking place. So I'm kind of grateful for that after the last little like intensity. I'm looking forward to Friday. It's also my birthday, so looking forward to that as well. But yeah, so basically Mars makes that square to Pluto, maybe dealing with those fears on some level that it's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be a nice way that things are dealt with, maybe something severe or hurting that happens. You know, it is in a moon's in a Mars sign, and Pluto's in Mars's exaltation, and Mars is now in this Mercury sign. So it could be something surgical, could be something precision based, could be something that deals with the thing that we're afraid of, but not necessarily in a very comfortable or manner that we're going to enjoy. But it does push things forward. I think in general, it's good to get a grip. At least you're doing something about it. And then the moon literally just before it leaves Aquarius makes that sextile to Jupiter. Okay, now that whatever's dealt with is dealt with, we can adjust to getting some support on some level. We can get the support that we want, connecting and harmonizing with our support networks and our support structures, and having some feeling of support in general before things kind of end in that Aries story on some level, like, or whatever kind of challenges came up in the last day or two. So there is that sextile to kind of like show us that there is a way that we can adjust to get connected to support networks and support for what will make us feel like we can get back to basics on some level. And then basically moon moves into Taurus and we move into Saturday. So moon moves into Taurus. There's an energetic shift right away. Of course, moon makes that trine to Mars. So things are not as sporty as they were, way more pleasure based. But at the same time with that trine to Mars, it's like something about that neurosis and that wanting to articulate the actions that we're doing, the efforts that we're putting our energies into, maybe kind of in a more supportive pattern from where we're kind of wanting to get more comfort and pleasure in general. And, although the moon, of course, is moving into its exaltation in Taurus, I don't think, like all the last Mars through Taurus transits, it just, because it activates this Uranus-Saturn square, it's not necessarily always going to be what we want from moon and Taurus. So it may not be necessarily good, but not necessarily bad either. So just moon's moving into a bit of hectic territory moving forward. Still, before getting forward in general, it's going to make it makes that trine to Mars. So we can try to integrate and understand that the specifics that we're driving at too, and just feeling more able to support and connect to those details and efforts. As I was saying before, we're now getting more specific, being more generous with a single effort rather than lots of efforts at the same time. We have to consolidate things, especially with Jupiter back into Aquarius. Okay, so moving forward, really just more lunar transits through Saturday. Mostly are not so comfortable ones. Like I said, even though moon is exalted here in Taurus, it has to make kind of hard aspects through most of Saturday until the end with it trines with Venus. But so first things first, it makes that square to Mercury. So maybe not the best time to send out a message or to at least be more delicate with messages. If we have to say something, of course, say it, but it might not be get heard or received harmoniously. Moon is then, because, the planet ruling over moon too is Venus, and Venus is in an uncomfortable position, doesn't necessarily want to, doesn't feel comfortable right now and wants to take things one thing at a time in order to get back to a comfort zone. And if there's a lot of kind of hecticness, it's not going to be so willing to compromise or at least keep the peace on some level. So yeah, and then moon makes, of course, the square to the sun, and this is also the last quarter moon, so crisis in consciousness. What is not working out that started with the Cancer new moon. Now we're going to have to see what of those things are not working out and make a decision of, do we continue to go forward with whatever we started at the Cancer new moon, or do we learn to let it go? It is a time to consolidate, to let go, to get a grip, to see what is worth continuing or not. Things are starting to get more Saturnian in general again. So we have to consolidate, right? Circumstances are maturing. We can't do everything. And then just to emphasize that more, moon makes that square to Saturn. And again, we're just feeling the lack, feeling the loss, feeling the decay. There's a slowdown. There's a hold off. There's not enough time for everything. Dealing with less. There's not enough for everyone to go around, and just getting more uncomfortable in general. Doing something to go forward through resistance too, I think is a big part of this last quarter moon. It's kind of like, even though it's like the last quarter moon is like consolidating and realizing what's working, what's not working, and turning over those things at the same time, it's kind of got this vibe of the first quarter moon, where it has to kind of get through some resistance in order to do it. So you may just have to do something even though you really don't want to. And then thankfully, the moon then makes this nice trine to Venus. And this is like kind of, and I like this because Venus really needs to get a break here, and Moon also. And so they can kind of connect and give some more tangible and tactful and sensual and more specific, and even like, I want to like imagine, when you make fabrics, it's like, okay, the fabric itself feels really good, but then when you realize like how it was made is really what makes it feel so good. Like a nice cashmere, it's like, it's so woven together in a way that just feels so amazing through your fingers, so to speak. Like, this is how I'm imagining it. So this is like getting down and just enjoying maybe a passion project of some kind after a bit of a shit day. That's how I kind of see it too, is like this maybe just connecting with those detailed creative projects as well, that are kind of free from some distractions on some level, just for that time being, and maybe staying up a little bit later to finish something creative that you really enjoy. Okay, so I think that is it for Saturday. So let's just go into Sunday. And there's kind of like a back-to-back conjunction vibe going on. So first things, even though they're not like by the minute, they're in the degree range of the Cazimi now. So that's just flavoring the whole vibe from that trine to Venus into the next day. And first thing that really the moon does is it makes the conjunction to Uranus in Taurus. And maybe things are kind of flipping out a little bit. Maybe nothing you wanted to do is necessarily happening right now. It's maybe one of those Sundays where you don't just get to sleep in and do whatever you want through the day. You have to kind of do something. Or it's vice versa. Maybe you're used to your Sundays being just like chock full of responsibilities, and things just restabilize this broken ground. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have nothing to do today. Could be one of those two, but let's see. So, see where it's at for you. Venus is still in Virgo, so there is this focus in on details, or something that's uncomfortable that you're trying to manage to get back into something more comfortable. Or maybe it's a lot of work to get, like I said, using this quilt or this fabric analogy, it's a lot of work to make fabric. So it could be somehow related to that there is going to be some comfort that comes out of all this hard work, but maybe right now it's not a time to necessarily enjoy it. So things might get a little bit left field, but at least they're going somewhere. Maybe what you're learning now could be really useful later too. So just try to pay attention. And then, we get the Mercury Cazimi in, let's see, when does it go exact? It's basically just Cazimi through the whole day, but anyway. So Mercury Cazimi in Leo, this is a mind and matter clicking instance. Where are you at with yourself being in Leo? This is like figuring that out, seeing it clearly. The mind is really purging. Sun is super high dignity right now being in Leo. So it has that really strong purging ability to clear our minds out so that we can think straight, so we can articulate and be dexterous in a way that needs to be right now, because Mercury moves into that exact opposition with Saturn right after the Cazimi. So our minds need to be clear to deal with that. shit's kind of serious. Whatever the mind is purging now, what is being brought into absolute focus is really needed. This is a seriousness in the world, maybe seeing clearly from our side of things, being from Leo and where the sun is. It's like our sides of things, seeing where the seriousness of the world is being at, and being like, okay, sure, there's a lot of energy to do things right now with the sun being in Leo, but do I have enough energy to do something about it? It's not things necessarily we want to do either. It's not necessarily things we love to do, but maybe we have to do it. This is dealing with things in a very mature manner, and also a very measured manner, because the Cazimi that just happened is in Leo. So there's something more intentional in our decision-making process and our actions, rather than just impulsive. Like with Mars, with the sun, it's more intentional. And we have the sun on our side here, and there's a warmth and vitality. There is a lot of strength and energy to do something. It's not going to last forever. It doesn't have as long of a weight through a sign as the outer planets do, but the sun is going to be measured and to do things one thing at a time. That maybe it's like we're kind of getting as much as we can handle one thing at a time. And so we can kind of use Mercury's enthronedness into the heart of the sun to make quick and fast and flexible decisions as they need to be made in order from our side of things, right? So maybe this is good news, but we need it on some level, but it could also be a wake-up call. We can't do shit the same way that we've always been doing it either. So there are some consequences to things, especially if we've been doing things a bit more recklessly or arrogantly in general after that whole Mars through Leo transit. And that kind of like seriousness kind of closes off the week as we move into Monday. So Monday, first thing is that we get the moon trines with Pluto. Somehow maybe what we were afraid of doesn't appear so scary anymore. So that's kind of nice. But then, yeah, the sun makes that opposition to Saturn. So scariness is dealt with, but seriousness is faced off. So this might be just reaffirming what was made clear to us yesterday, the day before, on the end of the week on Sunday. What side of things are working for us and what side of things are working for others. Where are we in the story, and in what ways are we relating to the rest of the world's story? Are we ready to look at the world and the problems today responsibly and honestly? This is starting off the month too. Like, this is the first day or two of August, right? So it's a chance to do things differently. Story is the sun moving past Saturn and moves into the superior position too, right? So moving forward, sun is going to be in the superior position to Saturn. With any upcoming transits that sun's going to make to Saturn moving forward, sun is going to be in the superior position. So it's going to be difficult moving forward on some levels, because there's things that we have to do now. It can't just be like things happening to us. We have to do something in order to make things workable again. And I think this is us coming, like I was been saying in the last weeks, this is us coming into a clear view of what the winter is going to be about. And I think it's going to be not a necessarily easy winter. Of course, we've dealt with a couple of difficult winters, especially the 2020, 2021 winter. But I think the difference between those last ones and this ones is that there's something we can actually do about it now. There's something that's solvable now. Maybe for some of us who haven't got vaccinated, now we can get vaccinated. Maybe for some of us who weren't able to make money last winter, now we can make money, but we have to do something about it. We have to actually put energy into it. We can't just assume that everything's going to work out because it has been maybe for the last couple months with Jupiter in Pisces. So what are we going to do about that individually? What are we going to do about that ourselves? This is also realizing that there's maybe a lot of problems in the world outside of just the COVID pandemic too. It's like maybe for some of us who have been vaccinated now, realizing that, okay, like there's so like the world's a complex place. It's not just going to be one. It's not. There's so many people in the world. There's so much dynamics in the world. It's like you could open up the news and it's like it's like 100 problems all at once. And this is kind of realizing that like the COVID story is not the only story out there. And I think also this is us realizing on some level that just being cynical or sarcastic about it, ironic about it, overthinking things, and taking more of an observer's position on stuff is not going to be enough. So the story, like things are kind of get flipped on this some level, like with the opposition, it kind of flips things. And I think with the sun moving into the superior position, it's saying that like just taking that distance position of Saturn is not enough to deal with whatever things you have to deal with now. And we have to do something, because moving forward, doing is what's going to get things done. Learn through doing. But also with all that Mercury energy, with Mars and Venus in Mercury, it's like we can try and be more. We can get more comfortable by being more specific. We can put our efforts into more smart tactics as well, and try with the sun being in that measured dominant position now. I think that this means that we can at least deal with one thing at a time. And I think, but at the same time, I think actions are really going to be necessary to deal with problems moving forward, because it's going to be a tough winter. So now's the time to make some changes and to do things differently. And in general, I think that this opposition is very sobering, contemplative, and kind of getting wise through difficulty kind of transit in general. But we can do it because we have to get wise. And I think that August, September, there is a lot of good stuff happening with Venus, especially moving into its domicile Libra. I think that's a really good thing. But once we get into October, November, December, things are going to get really complicated, I think, especially with once the sun moves into Libra, so it's going to be in its fall. And then by December with the Venus retrograde, and also the transits through Scorpio, reactivating the Saturn-Uranus square. I think those are going to be a bit complicated, actually. So let's use this good astrology now to make the changes we need to make. Changes made now will definitely put us into a better position for when we're in the winter. And this is kind of just realizing in general, that the summer is not going to be forever. And if we can make changes now, we can just be more prepared for when this consolidating gravitas becomes more of a serious issue that we have to deal with the sun moving into the superior positions. So, right. Then basically there's a bunch of lunar transits that happen. So first things first, Moon makes that square to Jupiter. Maybe some beliefs about what is happening are not on the same page with where things are. Things are kind of forcing forward. If we can't accept them, then we might just kind of get lost in them a little bit. So I think this is just reemphasizing the seriousness of that opposition. And then the moon moves into Gemini. And so there's a shift in energy, but right away it makes that square to Mars. So the two planets in Mercury ruled signs that are maybe a little bit pissed at each other on some level. Mercury is in the Cazimi. I mean, it's like, for me, it's still in the Cazimi, and it's in opposition to Saturn. So whatever it is, whatever's kind of pissing each other off, it's kind of serious. And that's it for the astrology this week. All right, just to talk a little bit about next week. So next week is a bit more crazy cool in general. We have the Venus trine Uranus, definitely interesting, cool, sexy, kinky, and even maybe strange, fun, uncomfortable, but at least exciting. And then Mercury is going to square Uranus, a forceful boost, maybe in an innovative, exciting, strange, but boastful way. I don't know. And then Sun squares Uranus. I don't know what the hell's going on there. Pretty wild, hectic, hard, uncompromising. And then we got the Leo new moon, time for some fresh start in what is authentic, individual, and worth doing. There's still another Aquarius full moon in this lunation. We got that second Aquarius full moon, so it's a blue moon. So even if we can get in touch with our personal, individual things right now, where does that stand in general? Where do we stand? And it can be like a fresh start to get very clear, known, direct, but also very serious with all that Aquarius Saturn energy, serious about where we are and what that means for the future. So everyone, that's it for the astrology this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing. Every little bit, as you know, goes a really long way. And if you want to book a consultation with me, check out my new website. Super excited about it. It has a scheduling system so you can book in advance as you need to. And it just really streamlines everything. So check that out. Of course, if you have any questions, just contact me directly. Also, if you haven't signed up for Perry Dust's newsletter, where I do monthly overviews of the astrology plus individual horoscopes for each sign, especially I would adjust it to your ascendant sign. Sign up for that. The link is down below, and check it out. So I hope everyone's going to be doing fine this week. There's some seriousness, there's some impactfulness, but life goes on. Life is what it is, and it is life on life's terms sometimes. So I hope that you all do well. Keep coming back. Bye for now. See you next week.